Spectacular stuff. Now, the designers of Blackpool's dazzling illuminations never fail to come up with displays which amuse and delight the millions of visitors who see them every year. But of all the sights you might expect to see, a religious scene turned into a roadside light show may not be one of them. But this year, the Archdiocese of Blackburn will be shining a light on the crucifixion, and it'll get an early seasonal switch on to mark Easter. Earlier, I was joined in the studio by Canon Simon Cox, the area dean for Blackpool, who says this isn't the first time the church has tried to spread its message at the attraction. Reverend Simon, very many thanks for coming in to talk to us today. Just tell me a little bit about the Illuminations project that you've been involved with.
Well, in the year 2000 there was an illuminations project done called Jesus the Light of the World, and that was done to celebrate the 2000 years after Jesus' birth, although the date's not quite completely correct, and that got blown down in an enormous storm, and it was slightly old technology anyway, so ever since it got blown down we've tried to see if we could get something restored, and then working with a number of people, in particular Andy DeVal, who's the Community Diversity Officer for Blackpool Council, and a couple of other people, eventually churches together in Bispham, have been able to commission a new piece of work. So it's been designed by the Blackpool Illuminations department. They came up with some they asked for some basic ideas, came up with some draft pictures.
I've seen the pictures, very impressive.
Oh, those are the later ones. We then worked over the draft ones. Some of them were absolutely sort of gothic and not quite what we wanted. And then eventually we fined down to one, which is the basis, the one we've now got. And then we sat down with the engineers and they said, well, if you do this, it's so much easier and so much cheaper to do. And it's still expensive, but nonetheless we were able to bring it down cost-wise as well. And then we commissioned it, and so it'll be switched on the 10th of April at 8 o'clock outside Uncle Tom's cabin.
Well, we'll come on to that in just a moment. Interesting what you say though about the designers thinking you would prefer something gothic. Was that a surprise to you when you saw what they'd come up with? Yes,
it was really, although we did give them lots of different ideas, but they had words in sort of like gothic lettering, and at one stage the Jesus looked a bit like a samurai warrior. We're much happy with where we ended up. They just gave us a range, and we actually worked our way through the range and said, well, we don't like that, and we quite like that, but can we do that with it, and so on. So by a process of elimination, and there's a chap who's the chapter clerk for the Blackpool Deanery chapter called Stefan Nistriansky. He's the vicar of Lancashire, so he and I and Andy sat down with the Illuminations team and with the design artist, and so we then got this second draft and then worked over it, as I say, with the engineers. So
not the first time then that there's been a religious theme of the Illuminations. I thought it would have been.
There are others as well, actually, on the front. There's a faith forum one, which is a light box with 9 different religious symbols on the front, and then there's one which I think it was paid for by the Cultural Department of India, but it's essentially got a sort of Hindu basis to it, so it's not alone at all, but there was this Christian one before, and we thought it was a good idea to replace it.
And what kind of reaction has that had from the public in the past? Religious symbols in a secular environment sometimes we only have to look back to yesterday and the controversy over the dropping of Easter from the National Trust's egg hunt.
Although it turned out to be slightly a bit overblown.
Yes, yes.
Overblown egg.
We sense that.
No, I mean, Andy is a diversity officer and he works for Blackpool Council. He's been highly supportive of the whole project, and the Faith Forum has been broadly supportive, and that's interfaith anyway. We have a very, we believe, distinctive message to proclaim, but that doesn't mean that it's, I think a lot of people seem to think that the only way to deal with faith is to actually go for common denominator, and that's taking everything down to the lowest possible point. Well, that's not respectful to any of the faiths. It's much more realistic and honest to say there are real and significant differences. We don't believe the same things, but that doesn't stop us from respecting each other.
And what kind of reaction would you hope to get from the public who see it?
I hope it will be positive, I hope it will be thought-provoking, and I hope that they'll actually consider that they may be hearing something which is to their benefit because we do call it good news, not for no reason at all.
Because I think I read that there were expected to be 3.5 million viewings of...
Yes, well, the Illuminations have 3.5 million visitors a year, and of course it's a very good reason to go to Blackpool, an even better reason to stay in Blackpool. We would like people to stay in Blackpool rather than just pass through, but it draws 3.5 million visitors every year, so as it will be part of the Illuminations. It's more than just part of the Illuminations because it's got a second function, but 3.5 million people see all the Illuminations, so they will see that one as part of it.
What's its second function?
Well, we've been promised that just as this year it's being switched on the Monday of Holy Week. We have Holy Week and Easter week either side of Easter, and so the promise is that it will be switched on for the 2 weeks either side of Easter each year, and therefore be available for Christians in the area to use as a focus. I would imagine that we might end up with a couple of small services going on at the foot of the illumination, though you do have to wait a little bit later for it to be dark enough to see it.
You mentioned the 10th of April before. I hadn't realised it was going to be switched on in situ. I thought it was maybe going to be stationed somewhere else, so it will be in the location that it will be in for the illumination.
Absolutely, it's going to be its position. So when it's switched on, it will then be switched off and left in position until the illuminations are then switched on. The others are also already starting to be put up. It takes a lot of work from the illuminations department to get all the illuminations up, tested, working, ready for the big switch on, and then of course as soon as the season finishes, they've got to take them all back down again. Of
course, yeah, not a 5-minute job by any stretch of the imagination.
It keeps them employed all year long.
Now, you mentioned that it is quite a costly exercise. This, you're looking to raise funds to cover the cost, aren't you?
Well, we need £25,000 is the target figure that we've set, and we've taken we have a promise of a loan from a local charity that is going to lend us the money so that we can pay the bill straight away, because we wouldn't want to be in debt to Blackpool Council. It wouldn't be fair to them. They're very strapped for cash at the moment. So we have. If you'd been interviewing me yesterday, I'd have said we have £7,000 raised already. As a result of Churches Together in Lancashire, who have made a magnificent grant, I can now say that we're over the halfway mark of 12,500, because they've given us a £5,000 grant towards it.
Well, we'll put details on the screen for anybody who feels compelled or inclined to donate. Reverend Simon, many thanks for coming in. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.